Welcome in, race fans, to this edition of Through the Gears presented by Front Stretch. I'm your host, Tino, and I couldn't be more excited to get back into the NASCAR racing and betting action for this weekend at WWT Raceway, the World Wide Technology Raceway, Gateway, St. Louis, whatever you want to call it. I know we'll be calling and cashing some winners in this one this week. I got to give a special shout out to some people who commented on our last video. Kyle B8, he was definitely excited to see the beautiful schemes that were racing at Charlotte, and as I was as well. I was there at the track, and it was awesome. The environment was so great to be there, and I'll get into a little bit more in the Coca-Cola 600 recap, but it was awesome being at the track there, seeing the different cars, seeing all the patrioticness of it, honoring our heroes for that Memorial Day weekend race. And, we'll get into more of the betting aspect in just a little bit, but shout out to Kyle B8 for commenting. I really appreciate him. He told me to have a good time at the track, and I appreciate that. I definitely did. So thank you to him. Thank you for Phil for being on the show as well at Full Tank with Phil. He came on last weekend, and we had a great time, and it was our birthday, so we had a great time talking about some betting action as well. Shout out to Donald Veal as well. He picked the 17, 19, 24, and 54 to win that one. Unfortunately, didn't get that done, but I was right there with the picks too, Donald. I mean, we had Truex in the 19. I liked William Byron as well. He was up there. He was someone I really was trusting to get it done. And then the 54 car as well of Ty Gibbs, who started on the pole, looked like he was going to be strong, led a lot of the first stage. We'll talk about that, and we'll get into that one in just a little bit here. Thank you for commenting on the last video there, guys. Really appreciate that. If you're watching this video now and you want to be shouted out on the next one, all you got to do is leave a comment down below. Be sure to like the video and that you're subscribed as well. We got a lot to talk about heading into WWT Raceway this weekend. I'm excited to go through it all for you guys here. If you want more of an extensive breakdown, Seth Woolcock, shout out to him. He had me on his show at In Between Media there. We went over an hour and a half just talking down some betting picks, some analysis, some NASCAR storylines as well, with Stewart-Haas Racing closing their doors. Unfortunately, Kyle Larson will be granted a waiver. You can find all my thoughts and opinions on those matters at In Between Media on Seth Woolcock's show there on the back road. I talked extensively with him about those topics there, but I'll give you the short, concise version about our picks. We'll talk about some different things here on Through the Gears, and I'll make sure everyone leaves this video locked and loaded, ready to get back into victory lane and making some money. So without further ado, let's go through the gears. Let's get right into it. It's the Coca-Cola 600 recap, and unfortunately, Mother Nature stays undefeated as that race got called early due to rain with about 150 laps left there. So still a lot of racing action that was still to be had, and that's the most disappointing thing for me in that one, is the fact that we had guys and drivers in position to win that race, in position for a good finish, in position to help us cash out and sweep the month of May, like we were talking about, hitting on all the outright winners up until the very last race at the Coca-Cola 600. And to me, that was the hard part about that one, was not seeing it go the distance. Now, in my opinion, whether or not it should have been canceled or not, I think that's up to NASCAR. I think they did the right thing. The track wasn't dry. You don't want to keep people there and up until 2, 3 a.m., especially the drivers, and the safety risk factor that comes in there. That's just racing. That's just what happens when you can't race in the rain. That's really all my thoughts there. But in terms of our picks, let's take a look at that now, because we had to win outright Martin Truex Jr., William Byron, Tyler Reddick, and Chase Elliott. All 4 of those drivers performed the way I had wanted them to. Tyler Reddick actually was starting from the back. He got a penalty, had to serve a pass-through. And now with the Coca-Cola 600 being the longest race of the year, I thought that was no problem for Reddick. If anything, I thought it might have helped to see how his car fared being in traffic and working his way all the way towards the front, and that's what he did. And that car looked so good towards the second half of that race. He finished in 4th. After starting in the back, finishing in 4th for Tyler Reddick was something that I was really looking forward to seeing him, if the race did get restarted or resumed there, seeing if that car being capable of going from last to top 5 with 150 laps left, could he have gone out front? And if so, I really think, with as hard as it was to pass certain drivers. Now, for instance, I also want to tip my cap to Christopher Bell. That 20 team has been struggling. They had a great car. They raced very well at this track last season, so it was not a fluke win by any means for him. I think they were dominant in the times that they were leading, but it was also harder to pass drivers when they were leading. Christopher Bell, for example, we saw the same thing with William Byron. And drivers, when they were in the lead, they were just able to manage it well. I thought the racing overall was great. It was just disappointing. I'm going to keep going back to it, leaving about 150 laps left on the table here. And this is why it didn't really hit me right away. We left the track, made it back to the hotel, and I was like, okay, Christopher Bell won. That ruined my birthday. That's tough. Got rained out. But when you think about it, 150 laps left at the Coca-Cola 600, a mile-and-a-half track where we've seen some really great finishes thus far this season. To me, that's what kind of hurt the most, was seeing as much racing that could have been had. Whether it was Rex, didn't really see much of any. I'm not rooting for Rex, but that could change. That could really change the dynamic of a race, whether it's the cautions that come out, the timing of them, or the drivers that are involved. That's one. Didn't see any major wrecks. Maybe we wouldn't have, but if we would, it would have changed the entire race in some capacity. So that's one aspect of the race that could have happened. Two, fuel mileage. There's been so many times at a Coke 600 with it being a strategy-filled race, with it having that extra stage there at the end, implications to maybe 2 tires or 4 on the pit stops, whatever the case may be. Strategy was another thing I really wanted to see play out. And then 3 was obviously if it just had stayed green. We could have had cautions, we could have had strategy, or we could have just had the same racing overall. I really wanted Christopher Bell. I'm not saying that he didn't earn it. I will say I think if there was someone that was deserving of the win, I think that he was one of those drivers. William Byron deserved it. Christopher Bell. Ty Gibbs led some, but fell back a little bit. Denny Hamlin had a good car, but pit road struggles. If someone was going to win the race, at least they were leading for a majority of it when the race got called. I'll say that. I think that's fair to say. But overall, would have really liked it to stay green. And with it being, rained out there and the drivers finishing where they did, I'm still happy with, or maybe not happy, but satisfied with the drivers we did have in position. Top 5 for Martin Truex Jr. That didn't hit, but he was racing up there. I'm not quite sure, honestly, why he got moved to the back. He finished in 12th, but I knew that he was going to be able to have the car capable with how he was racing in the beginning of that race to potentially come back and finish up there. But William Byron, top 5, cashed that. He finished 3rd. We got a Tyler Reddick top 5 as well, finished in 4th there. 2 of the bets that I really wanted to see hit was Bubba Wallace top 10. Bubba was racing for the lead at one point, definitely a top 5 car, I would say, all day, maybe at least a very top 10 car, and he finishes 11th. And that's the thing that hurt the most, because we did cash on the Indy 500. If you guys are following me at Tino and Pattigno, you saw pick Joseph Newgarden to win that one, and he goes back to back. So having Newgarden, having 2 drivers inside the top 5, the Bubba Wallace top 10 as he finished in 11th would have been the icing on the potential birthday cake there, because obviously we always want to hit on an outright winner, but anytime we can't, we do want to make that back with those prop bets. That's what they're for, right? At least that's how I view it. And then if we are hitting on an outright winner, it's just a little bit extra there. So if we're not hitting on outright winners, we make it back with prop bets. That happened here to some extent, and I'm satisfied with the drivers we had that were in position to potentially get us the win there in the Coke 600. The best part about not being able to continue on the streak of winning outright winners throughout the month of May is by starting a new one. That's something I'm most excited about now. Dust ourselves off, pick ourselves back up. You can't get up without being down first. And now we're here. We're back. We're ready to win at WWT this weekend. And, that's the other thing, too. Mother Nature, she was the one that beat us last weekend. Christopher Bell, sure, he got the win. And like I said, I think he was deserving of it. But that's the one thing. If I was going to lose that streak, I wanted whatever driver to earn it, to beat me. I wanted to get beat and see who did it and respond. And now I'm even more hungrier because I didn't have that shot didn't have the chance, didn't have the late race restart to root on whoever it may have been to get it. And we're going to get back what's rightfully ours in this one. So let's look at the odds breakdown as we go through this, some betting strategies, and some overall WWT prep in this one. It's a mile, 1 mile and 0.25 track here. It's a shorter track, but it's not the shorter type tracks that we're used to in terms of the intermediates either. At the they're a mile and a half, and the other short tracks are a mile long, right? So this is right in between, and it's a very unique track as well. Now, when we look at data too, that's one thing that I was really curious about, how that was going to fare in this one. We've only raced here 2 times before in the Cup Series. So what can we really look at? What tracks are comparable to that of WWT Raceway? We're looking at Phoenix because that is also a flat track, New Hampshire Motor Speedway, and Richmond. These are the primary comp tracks that I've looked at so far. And I did a lot of my data and research for this race based off of the other races we've seen at WWT. And I'm glad I did so, because with that, a lot of the same, or some of the same drivers consistently were good the second year as they were in the first. And I know, some drivers have momentum. Some drivers are having a better season than they did last year. Some drivers are having a worse season than they did last year. All things to take into account. But when we look at manufacturers as well, not a clear-cut favorite in this one. We've seen that, for instance, Phoenix, Toyota's dominant. A mile and a half in terms of maybe Vegas, or we saw Charlotte, we were expecting Chevy heavy in that one. Here, the winner has come from the top 7 of the grid both times. So that's another thing. Qualifying track position is going to be key. And like I mentioned, no manufacturer advantage. So the top 10s in the last 2 years, 7 Fords, 7 Chevys, and 6 Toyotas. There you have it, folks. I mean, there's not a clear manufacturer bet or driver that I'm picking out because of their manufacturer. And I think that's going to help us in this one. We'll get into the more of the drivers and who I'm looking at in terms of picking them outright to win in just a little bit. But aside from that, that's sort of how I'm going to be attacking WWT this weekend. Last year, I'll say this as well. I knew it was Kyle Busch right from the jump, just based off of his first race at WWT, the way he was able to lead laps, the way he was able to race up front, the way he was able to pass cars if needed. And to me, I saw that last year, said, okay, Kyle Busch is 11-1. That's great value. I expect him to potentially go out and win the pole, and that number will be cut in half. What does he do? Win the pole, number gets cut to 7-1, and ultimately he wins the race. So if I'm going off any research I did last year, this year, I'm feeling pretty good about this one. Let's get into the odds breakdown. Time for the odds breakdown. Let's get into it right off the bat. It's going to be Kyle Larson and Denny Hamlin, and I don't think that'll change throughout the remainder of this season. Now, with Larson specifically, that's something I didn't touch on with the Coca-Cola 600 recap. Real quick there, Kyle Larson obviously missing the race there. He was attempting to do the double. He completed the Indy 500, wanted a better result in that one, deserved a better result in that one, ended up speeding on pit road, did not get a top 10 finish like I felt like he could have. But looking into things now, how will that impact Kyle Larson moving forward this season? Well, if NASCAR gives him a waiver, as they should, he'll be still locked into the playoffs. But regardless, Kyle Larson last week, or at least Justin Allgaier, who was filling in for him, and that 5 team, they had a top 15 car, and Allgaier raced his way up almost into the top 10, finishing 13th around there, I believe. And now my point of that is the fact that Kyle Larson could have jumped in that car at that race with the speed it had. I think if he did so, he would have gotten that car and potentially won that race, and that would have been awesome to see. The fact that he didn't even get to try the double is something that I'm looking at for a storyline heading into this week. Forget all the waiver stuff. Kyle Larson admittedly said that he's very upset about his performance in Indy 500 and then missing one of NASCAR's crown jewel races at the Coke 600. To me, an angry, pissed off, upset Kyle Larson, who is one of the best drivers in the world, proves to be a storyline heading into this one, because he can now have extra motivation to prove people wrong and win this race. Now, maybe not proving people wrong, because everyone knows Kyle Larson is one of the best and can win, but I just feel like he thinks that. He thinks he needs to go out and sort of prove prove it to himself, should kind of just show up after he wasn't able to do so last weekend. He's plus 550. Denny Hamlin's plus 600. Christopher Bell is plus 800. Ryan Blaney plus 850. William Byron plus 900. Same can be said for Truex and Logano at that 9-1 number. And that's where we'll stop right now. So we already talked about Larson. Hamlin's sort of the same deal. We know he can win on any given week. For those 8-1 to 9-1 drivers from Bell down to Logano, the two that stand out to me the most are the two Team Penske drivers in Ryan Blaney and Joey Logano. The reason being is there's 4 drivers that finish inside of the top 6 at this racetrack in both two consecutive years here that we've raced there. Joey Logano won it the first year and finished 3rd last year. Ryan Blaney finished 4th the first year and 6th last year. To me, that is huge. Now, Team Penske has struggled this year. That is no doubt. Yeah, Joey Logano won the All-Star race. Yeah, we cashed out on it too. But my point is, that's the All-Star race. That's at North Wilkesboro. You can't compare that here. If anything, maybe you could compare in terms of the flatness of both tracks. But what I'm trying to say is here, if they're going to turn things around in the second half of this regular season, this is where it starts. Especially how Ryan Blaney and Joey Logano both did not really have strong runs at the Coca-Cola 600. Ryan Blaney specifically. Let's get into him right now, because with Ryan Blaney, almost finished dead last at the Coke 600 after having a problem with his car. And the last time I saw Blaney be pissed off and upset after getting into a wreck or an issue that caused him to have a very bad day when he didn't need it was last year at Texas. Now, both two tracks that Ryan Blaney has won at. Keep following me here. Ryan Blaney, whenever he's pissed off, I feel like it actually benefits him because he's able to use that aggression if he can control it and just continue passing drivers, keeping leads, maintaining the extra aggression he needs in that car to get the most out of it. I think Ryan Blaney does that very well. Now, with that being said, terrible finish at Charlotte last weekend, a race he won last year. By the way, he's the defending champ as well. All these things happening for Ryan Blaney, keep that in mind. Because after the same thing happened to him at Texas or something similar where he got into a wreck and finished it back in the 20s when he could have had maybe a top 10 car, he went out and won at Talladega the following week last year. So now, just something to think about. We'll get into that with the outright winners. That's why I'm thinking about Ryan Blaney and Joey Logano as well. You can't not think about those two guys based off their track record at WWT thus far. Martin Truex Jr., another one. In terms of value, let's look at value guys now. Plus 900 for Truex. He's someone that if you've been tuning into this show, we talk about him for the last 4 to 5 weeks here. And honestly, I don't mind it because he's been notching off top 5s. Yeah, he finished 12th last weekend, but he's been in contention. Would have won at Kansas. Could have won at Richmond. Maybe he had a top 3 car at Dover as well. Point is, Truex has been up there and he's been running very well. Same Darlington, that was going to be Truex if he doesn't get, or could have been Truex if he doesn't get into an issue early on with William Byron and Ryan Blaney as well. So value there for Truex. I like it. And that's a number that we'll talk about when it gets to the outright winners. But these are drivers you need to pinpoint early on to see where that value is, because post-practice and qualifying, it may not be there again. Getting into some guys now. Kyle Busch, we talked about how Ryan Blaney, Martin Truex Jr., Joey Logano have all finished inside the top 6 in the 2 races at this track. Well, the other one is Kyle Busch. He finished 2nd in the first year and 1st last year, winning this race, like I mentioned, and for him to be 11-1 as well. I do like that value for Kyle Busch. Can I trust Kyle Busch? No. He's been too streaky so far this season. If he goes out and beats us this week, that's just gonna be what it is. You know, I can't trust Kyle Busch to go. I expect him to have a strong run, but looking at how he's performed this season, I feel like that value is there though. 11-1 for Kyle Busch and his track record here. I feel like that's fair. I feel like that is, along with Truex, probably one of the better values on the board, as the books are pricing things correctly in this one, I would say. Looking now, Ty Gibbs, 14-1. Brad Keselowski, can't skip him because he's hot right now. Finished 2nd last week, and that's 4 second-place finishes in the last 6 races for the 6 team. Brad Keselowski is definitely back, and RFK has been the best forward performing team throughout this season. We've talked about that week in, week out. Do I think he continues that streak? I think the streak ends here at WWT. He just doesn't have the finishes. Now, he didn't really have the speed in that car either, so maybe they can crack a top 10. I don't see him being a threat to win this one. Ty Gibbs, Chase Elliott, Chris Buescher range from 14-1 to 15-1. Chase is a driver I look at, and you may be saying, well, why is he priced there? The reason is he missed this race last year because he was suspended for intentionally wrecking Denny Hamlin at Charlotte the week prior. Corey LaJoie filled in for him there, came back with like a 22nd place finish. So really nothing that they can go off of. I think Chase could have a strong run. I don't see him winning this one. Chris Buescher, again, 15-1. Brad has been the better performing RFK car out of the two, but those two cars have been the most identical out of all teams so far this season. So that's something to consider. And then Ross Chastain's another driver I'll mention. Plus 2,000 for him is great value for a driver who finished 8th here in the first year here. But those Trackhouse guys and Suarez and Ross Chastain just have not had the speed this season that make me want to bet on them. Simply put, at Darlington, I thought there was a great chance for Ross, and he ended up not even really being inside the top 10 for most of the day. So that one hurt there. Now, if we look for some long shots, I'm looking at the Stewart-Haas Racing drivers because of the news for this past weekend. We also see Alex Bowman 45-1, Josh Berry 55-1, and Briscoe 70-1. So those would be the 3 long shots if you are going in that direction. But keep in mind, in the last 2 races here, the winner has come from starting inside the top 7. And with how hard it's been passing cars, and with where, the pole sitter has been able to capitalize at this track in terms of getting good finishes or at least leading laps, that's why I'd probably hold off on the long shots in this one, because it's not something we've seen here before. Now, getting into our outright winners, this is where we make our money in each episode, and I'm really excited to bet on some of these drivers. First up, we talked about them in the beginning of the last segment of the odds breakdown, and it's going to be Kyle Larson. I know that might be not the flashy pick or not something that, people are interested in betting on because of his low value there at plus 550. Obviously, shop around. You may be able to get him for 7-1 as well. I heard that, beginning of this week that price was available. Here's the thing with Larson. He's gotten significantly better at this track, finishing 12th the first year and then 4th the next year. Now, I know he hasn't qualified well here, and that's something we have talked about, but if anyone's going to come back from that, it is Kyle Larson. And the other thing, I just feel like he's motivated to go out and dominate this one. I would not be surprised. He was in position for a top 3 finish. He was racing in 2nd place before a late race restart here in this one. So if it wasn't going to be Kyle Busch, had the race gone green, or if Larson was able to catch up, it would have been Kyle Larson. That's something to think about with Kyle Larson. I think that's our first pick, plus 550 there. Now, who's next? Well, it's Ryan Blaney. And I don't necessarily love the value of plus 850, but if the trend continues with that driver who's starting inside the top 7, winning the race, that number will go down. I don't know by how much. Maybe a 750. We could see 7-1 with his track record here. The comparison to Phoenix as well is huge. That is Ryan Blaney's best track, and he is, with Harvick retiring, he's the best driver at Phoenix Raceway right now. So Ryan Blaney, someone to consider. That I'm putting him on my card, and I'm betting. Here's another thing too, guys. I am betting on Ryan Blaney now. Right when you watch this video, bet on Ryan Blaney, because like I mentioned, that value is going to go down, and the same could be said for Martin Truex Jr. New Hampshire, he's won at. Richmond, he's won at. Should have won at this year earlier. What's another track that he's comparable to? Phoenix. Phoenix could have had a little bit more speed, but this is a team that's come on late, come on well, and tracks that use this current package that we are going to be seeing at WWT, Dover, Charlotte, Kansas. Enough said. Truex has been great at all of those tracks so far this season, and I know we've bet on him the last few weeks here, but he hasn't necessarily let me down. He's been in a position to win. Our other picks have won. So, I can't just pick one driver to go out and win it. If I would, it would be Truex. But, that's why you have to be smart and creative in constructing your betting cards each week. I'm not saying pick 10 winners every week. If you want to, by all means, because then you could hopefully have better chance of winning. I mean, the odds definitely are better for you there. But for me, what I do and what I talk about on each show is picking 3 to 4 drivers that I like, definitely 2 midweek to get that outright value before practice and qualifying, when after that number and the numbers overall on the board will change. So Ryan Blaney, Martin Truex Jr., obviously Kyle Larson as well, but those two guys with the plus 850 to 9-1 value for Truex and Blaney, that's where I'm looking at before practice and qualifying. And if I were to pick another driver to keep my eye on, it's honestly Ty Gibbs. Now, Ty Gibbs has not had the best, stats here or anything like that, but if we're looking back to last year when he was a rookie, why? Like, why are we? Like, I don't understand. Ty Gibbs last year is even at all comparable to the Ty Gibbs we're seeing this year. This driver just won the pole for the Coke 600, led most of stage 1, finished inside the top 10 there. It was maintaining top 5 speed throughout that entire race. I think his win is coming. I think Ty Gibbs will win within these next 3 weeks. WWT, I think he's got a great shot based off of what these tracks are comparable to. He had speed at tracks like Phoenix. He had a little bit of speed at Richmond, but I just feel like with the momentum he has coming from Charlotte and earlier this year when they were strong as well, I think this could be a track where he goes out and surprises a lot of people. At 14-1, that's fair value for a driver still going after his first win, but in JGR equipment. And if it's not this weekend at WWT, you best believe I'm doubling down on him next week for Sonoma, as he's a great road course racer as well. After that, we look at Iowa, a little bit of a wild card, and obviously we'll get there when we get there. But that's just my thought process when I'm thinking about outright winners. Ty Gibbs might be on my list. I think I would be okay with waiting till after practice and qualifying, seeing where he starts in this one. If he starts outside the top 10, then I'm not betting on him. Then I'm just wrong. And I think then what I'm saying now, you can say, okay, well, Ty Gibbs didn't prove it to us when it mattered most this weekend in terms of the speed that we need out of that car consistently. Other drivers that I will mention are Joey Logano, as we alluded to him in the beginning with Ryan Blaney, and also Kyle Busch. Personally, I'm out on Kyle Busch, not completely, but he hasn't proven it to me in terms of the race winning speed when it matters most at the end of the day. He's been able to qualify on pole. It's Kyle Busch. He's one of the best ever. I know that, but to me, I think I'm okay with missing out on an 11-1 Kyle Busch here this year. Last year, things were different. He had 2 wins in the beginning of the season. Now that team is so streaky, he could have 2 great finishes and leading laps, or at least being up front. But ultimately, I just need to see him sort of prove that to me before I feel really comfortable betting on him to win a race outright when we have these other values on the board with Joey Logano as well. Team Penske, I think, if you can find a play where it's Team Penske to win. I know there was one that was plus 550 somewhere where you can find that for Team Penske to win. And then you get Joey Logano, Ryan Blaney as well. Obviously Austin Cindric, but those 2 drivers I mentioned have a real good shot of winning this one and turning their season around from the struggles they've had early on. For some prop bets, I do like top 5s, and the value there is at plus 110 and up on all the drivers I said to win the race outright. So Ryan Blaney and Martin Truex Jr., Joey Logano, I think they can fare well in that market. But now I'm looking at top 10 specifically, and that's where I really want to dive into a little bit of some underdogs here that can provide us with some value. First off is a driver that wouldn't be an underdog in this scenario based off of the speed he's been having and the consistency in that car. That's Alex Bowman in the 48 at plus 165 to get a top 10 in this one. To me, I think this is some good value for a driver in the last 10 races, has 7 top 10 finishes. And that's absolutely huge for Bowman. He's sort of been doing it sneakily, at least I haven't heard much out of him. Maybe he hasn't been in contention to win races, but you don't need it if he's knocking off top 10s consistently and maintaining his spot in the standings there. So plus 165 for Bowman. That is strictly a momentum play. He does not have the stats to really back himself up at this track, but I think with him being able to run well consistently and the Hendrick Motorsports speed and how dominant they have been on mile and a halves. Obviously, this isn't a mile and a half type track, but is a shorter, flatter one. He raced well at Phoenix. I think this could be a Bowman to get another top 10 before the streak runs out, potentially at Sonoma next weekend. Now, Michael McDowell, he is a driver that is just unloading with value so far this season at plus 380. For Michael McDowell to get a top 10, I think is huge here. And the reason is he's done so before. And you're not seeing this type of value out of other drivers this consistently like McDowell has shown us. He finished 9th in this race last year. And to me, I think they've only gotten better. Front Row Motorsports has been a huge team in terms of consistency and surprising. I feel like I'm not, it's no doubt on McDowell or Todd Gilliland, but I've just seen them perform so far this season, sometimes better than Team Penske, and that's been huge to see. So plus 380 for McDowell. I can see him being a gritty driver in this one, maybe showing speed early on as well. For him to also be getting a top 10 in this race last year, I think a top 10 is definitely doable for him in this one as well because of the speed they've brought to the track so far this season. Last driver I'm going to go with here is Ricky Stenhouse Jr. Now, I know we talked about him last weekend, and it hurt a little bit. He did not bring the speed we wanted him to, but long race, he could have had it. I'll be honest, didn't look like he was going to get it in terms of a top 10 there at the Coke 600, but it could have happened. It didn't happen at the time the race was over. So that's on me, and that's on Ricky and his team for not bringing the speed after getting back-to-back top 10s at that racetrack. But here at WWT, Ricky was in position for a top 10 finish, definitely a top 15, and that was before a late race incident between Austin Cindric and Austin Dillon, which Ricky Stenhouse Jr. was just collected in. Now, the reason I'm bringing him up as well here is he's 18-1 for a top 10. For a driver that was capable of getting it last year, and the speed that we've sort of seen him sneak his way into the top 15, if it's a long green flag run, he's been there, and it's something we talked about last week as well. I like Ricky at 18-1 here, just strictly based on value. I'm not throwing all my units on this, but maybe a little bit of sprinkle just because of the value and the fact that he is able to get these type of finishes at these racetracks. Have they gone green, or have maybe a chaos happens at the end and he avoids a wreck? So if Ricky can do that, I think that's good value. 18-1 for a driver that has speed or shown it at this racetrack specifically. Just a factor of bad luck last year and not being able to capitalize on the running position that he was in throughout the race. Closing things out now with our favorite plays that we've talked about throughout the episode, just to sort of recap what's on my mind right now before you put it on the betting card and get locked and loaded for a great racing weekend. First up, and this is a driver that I feel like I talk about in the favorite play segment recently a lot, and that's because he comes with the value as well. That's Martin Truex Jr. 9-1 for him to win this race outright. He's my favorite value play, which would make him one of my favorite plays in this one. I think he's got a great shot to win it. I think I need to stay on that Truex train just a little bit longer because I could see him winning this week, and if not, definitely winning at Sonoma next week as well. So I can't hop off it now. I've been riding it for a few weeks now, and I just need to lock in here because I feel like Truex is going to do so at this track and finally cashes out in an outright winner bet. I do have two other plays that are my favorite, I could say. Ryan Blaney for a top 5 at plus 110. I like the value there. I think it makes sense for Blaney in his finishes at this track, and I think he's determined as well. I could see him going out for the win, but if not, I think a top 5 is a safe bet. And then for a top 10, Michael McDowell there too. For him to be plus 380, I think that's fair value. And I think he's a little bit undervalued for guys that are around him, like Austin Cindric plus 380. This is one of Cindric's better tracks, but Cindric doesn't even have a top 15 so far this season aside from at Atlanta. Daniel Suarez, he's raced well here. And another driver I would keep an eye on would be Josh Berry at plus 200. He's been running strong at times where I wouldn't expect him to, and this would be a track that could suit his driving style. But overall, Michael McDowell there, when he's in that mix around those type of drivers for that value, I think he's performed better than everyone else I've mentioned on a consistent basis so far this season. So McDowell plus 380 for a top 10, Ryan Blaney plus 110 for a top 5, and Martin Truex Jr. plus 900 to win it. All right, guys, that'll do it for this edition of Through the Gears. Thank you so much for tuning in. Let me know who you think is going to win the race down in the comments below. Be sure to give a like and subscribe and turn the post notifications on as well while you're at it, because you do not want to miss the stock car scoop that comes out right after, each and every race on Sundays, giving you the breakdown and inside scoops from the Front Stretch Podcast Network and our great team here that really breaks down everything you guys need to know after the race weekend and all the storylines there, so you can prepare for what's to come and what happened and really get the most out of all of your NASCAR coverage that you're looking for. I'm looking forward to get back into victory lane for this one. I'm super excited for the racing action in this weekend. I feel like we have a good grasp on who's going to be fast here at this track, and I'll be sure to update you guys if anything changes, so be sure to follow me at Tino, Pattigno, across all social platforms as I put out updates to each of my picks all throughout the week. I don't want you guys to miss anything there. I want to be sure we cash and start a new streak of outright winners going forward. So thanks again for tuning in. I'll see you guys next week as we go through the gears.